What I'd like to experiment with is limb independence fills. And first, to elaborate what limb independence is. Just like it sounds, your limbs are more independent of one another, as opposed to whenever your right hand hits, your right leg has to hit. And you want to be able to separate the limbs so that you can have a little bit more freedom. And you got 4 limbs, so you can do a lot more approaches, a lot more dynamics, and a lot more styles. So it's very important to have a good grasp of independence so that you can become that much more musical in your phrasing and that much more control over what you want to execute. Because music, again, like I say, it needs to be a reaction. You need to play and then react to what you're listening to. You don't want to have your limbs getting in the way and you react and then your limbs go, no, 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 I've never done that, I'm not doing it. So you want to be able to create some freedom within your limbs. What has helped me to develop my independence is basically working with a lot of jazz. What you do is you start with an ostinato. An ostinato is just a repeated musical phrase. So you take your jazz ride pattern, ba da 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 da. I approached it a long time ago quite immaturely because I got, okay, I could do that pattern within 5 minutes, and then I was like, whatever I could do against that, I kind of went on an automatic pilot there, a bad automatic pilot, because it took me quite a few years to learn how to swing. I had to get to a point when I went to my practice room is not go behind a kit just to grab a ride cymbal and sit there just practicing how to swing. So you don't want to get caught in the concept like, oh, this is an easy pattern to play, as opposed to thinking this is a pattern that's easy to play, but how hard is it to play musically? You got to make sure you got the tone, the touch, and everything. And again, it always goes back to making sure that you listen to all kinds of different music so that you can be more versed in your mind and in your emotions. So once you've done your independence, you'll be able to just express yourself. Now, independent fills is a little bit different when it comes to beat independence, in the respect that usually the limbs are working together. They're kind of working off each other. It's not so much for ostinato patterns. But I've been experimenting with a few of them. They're quite interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an example, a few examples of limb independence and how you can start to begin to develop it more and more within your playing and in your fills. So basically, you want to choose an ostinato, a repeated musical phrase. It could be anything. It could be just, on our first examples, I just put just floor tom, 8th notes. And you can have one hand doing one thing, da 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 da, and then try to work in patterns with the other hand. The best way to do it is slowly. I cannot stress enough how slow it needs to be, because whenever I'm starting to work on a new pattern, I start it at a comfortable tempo, and I work it with a click, and then I slow it down till about, 40, 50 beats. And in that way, I get that much more control over it. If you're trying to do something that's difficult, like independence, and you're trying to take a faster tempo, you're going to leave on a real sour note, and you're going to I don't want to do that stuff. It's just, you need to experience some success. So first of all, you don't want to grab a Terry Bozzio video and start doing exactly what he does. You want to just take it nice and simple, a simple ostinato, like 8th notes on the floor tom. Like I'll play my first example for you here. Just 8th notes on the floor tom. The hi-hat I leave on the quarters. The bass drum I play just on the E of 2, and then the left hand is playing around off to the first tom, snare, second tom, first tom, and then a flam between the floor tom and snare. So I'll play it for you slowly first. Sounds like this. So you want to make sure you don't get too crazy with the independence, because if you get really out there with the independence, there could be a tendency to lose musicality. It's important to have good independence and a lot of control over each limb. But I think I had a danger one time of just focusing so much on independence that I forgot all about music. And it was like, yeah, I'm building this technique, but no one wants to play in a band with me because it doesn't feel good. So you got to make sure you keep that in perspective of being a musician and not just a drummer, if I can say that term. You know what I mean? You want to make sure that you're very musically inclined to your context. So now I'm going to play that fill with a beat. Sounds like this. See, when the notes are kind of sparse and not all jammed in there, it can kind of make a musical sense. You know, if you're trying to do ba-da-da-da-da-da with one hand, da-da-da-da-da, and then you want your hand to go ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then you want your foot to go do-da, ba-do-da, and then you're high doing something else. It can become very cluttered. So you want to make sure that it's very musical. Actually, in getting into this stuff, what I did is I actually didn't play the drum set. I just sat down and wrote it out, thinking, what's going to make musical sense? Starting with an ostinato, and then adding a limb in, and adding another limb in, and eventually you can come up with something very cool. Now, if your writing is not up to the point where you can sit down and just write out and think, that would sound musically, because it's hard to write the music and to hear what it's going to sound like. That takes a bit of practice. But you want to work on your independent fills. What you can do, start with your ostinato. We'll start with a basic pattern of just your floor tom, just doing eighth notes. And then you'll take your left hand and do quarters and eighths against it, just to start getting a feel. If you do repeated patterns with your left hand, it'll make it easier as opposed to actually just soloing against that ostinato. So I'm going to give you a basic idea of how to approach that with just the hands first. It'd be like this. See, I just took that one pattern, just kept on repeating it. You can find a rhythm that you like, and then move it around to the kit. Keep on repeating the same rhythm, and just move it around. So I'll do that same thing, moving it around. So that's kind of the basic starting for it. And what you could do is keep that ostinato on the floor tom, develop it with the bass drum, you know, get a half a dozen different rhythms and just keep on repeating it. And then find a rhythm that works between the two. Like I'll take our same pattern here, and then I'll start putting the bass drum and alternating it with the left hand. So it'd be like this. So you can see how it's starting to develop now, kind of the independence from the floor tom. And it could be the same pattern. You take it to the hi-hat foot. Generally speaking, drummers' weakest limb is the hi-hat foot. And obviously the best way to work at it is to practice it. The thing is, sometimes it's hard to figure out what to practice with the hi-hat foot if you're doing more of a rock pop setting. That's where the jazz has really helped me out that way. The jazz and the Latin has really helped my left foot become a lot stronger than it is. It's not nearly as strong as my right foot. I use it obviously a lot more. So we'll take our same pattern, so dotted quarter eighth, and now I'm going to work it between these three limbs. So here we go. So you can see, same pattern, just divided between the three different limbs. You can interchange that pattern, you can add different rhythms. So it's just kind of an idea of how to start developing this independence with your fills, okay? And in turn, as you develop your independence with your fills, it's gonna help your beats. And then when it helps your beats, it's gonna help your soloing. And when it helps your soloing, it's gonna help your overall, how should I say, your emotional independence. Again, that's where you can listen to the band and just play what you feel, as opposed to only what your limbs will allow you to. So in our next example, we have the ostinato is between the snare and the floor tom. It's going back and forth. And then we have again the hi-hat on the quarter notes. And then we have the left hand going up to the first tom, and then flam on the snare when the snare comes back on the right hand on beat 2. And then it goes up the first tom, flam on the snare. And then the bass drum embellishes throughout there. You have it on the of 1, sorry, the and of 2, and the E and of 3 and 4. And now with a beat. So there's a few examples of limb-independent fills, and it's very, very important that you get control over your limbs so that you can be that much more musical and have more variety within your playing, and that's where really your individuality comes out in your drumming, because again, like I say, you'll be free to feel the music emotionally, and therefore you will be able to produce what you feel. And that's the beauty about music, is such a wide variety of feelings. I remember that there was this one group that I was in. It was fun, but I actually got fired from it because the leader of the band wanted me to play what the other drummer played, and I played it note for note what he did, but everyone has a different feel. He wanted my feel to be like the other guys, and that you can't do that. That's impossible. It's everyone's individual feel is their own, and as you start to develop your own limb independence, again, you're going to start to develop your own style of playing, your own. I don't want to say this weird, but your own center of time. Like, we need to have a good center of time, but there's a lot of play, and like I say, music is very organic. So you want to be able to develop your own feel, and through the limb independence, it's just going to give you that much more variety and ultimately that much more success.